Right now on this Thanksgiving edition of the National Weather Desk, a closer look at El Nino and how it could impact your winter weather.
We tend to see warmer weather conditions across the northern half of the country.
We'll look back at the 2023 hurricane season and examine the strongest storms to make landfall in the U.S.
In the history of the United States, only 4 Category 5 hurricanes have ever made landfall.
Did you know weather played a critical role in the Pilgrim's story?
The waves are 100 foot high, and then the mainsail cracks.
Plus, more useful weather facts that could help you in your everyday life.
From our nation's capital, this is the National Weather Desk.
Good morning and happy Thanksgiving. Welcome to the National Weather Desk. I'm Angela Brown. As we count down the days to winter, none of us know how much snow or rain we will see where we live, but we do know this year's El Nino will be a major factor in the weather we see. This month, the Climate Prediction Center declared the weather pattern is now strong and could become even more intense in the next few months. That typically means warmer air up north and cooler, wetter conditions in the south. Meteorologist John Gum shows us what El Nino is all about and how it can impact winter weather.
So what exactly is El Nino? Well, in most typical years, trade winds tend to pile up warmer water off the coast of Asia. However, in El Nino years, those trade winds weaken, and we tend to get warmer water that forms off the coast of South America. And that, in turn, changes the weather pattern pretty significantly. So during El Nino years, we tend to see warmer weather conditions across the northern half of the country. Meantime, across the southern half of the country with an active jet stream, we tend to see wetter than normal conditions, with perhaps a little pocket of drier than average conditions across the Ohio Valley and mid-Mississippi River valleys. The other thing that El Nino can do is lower the amount of hurricane activity in the western Atlantic Ocean, particularly in the Caribbean. It doesn't tend to impact the Gulf of Mexico quite as much, but generally speaking, we tend to get fewer hurricanes during El Nino years versus neutral years or during La Nina years. So that's something else to keep in mind as we go through the next few months. That's something you're going to hear a lot about. El Nino, as it starts to form, perhaps becoming a strong El Nino and having impacts on the weather across the nation.
The Atlantic hurricane season ends 1 week from today, and while there is still a chance another storm could form, it's considered unlikely. So let's look back at the numbers for 2023. So far this year, there have been a total of 20 storms. 7 of them were hurricanes and 3 of them were major, meaning they were Category 3 or higher. Those numbers are all in the range of NOAA's forecast, which is updated back in August. The most destructive storm was Idalia. At least 4 deaths in Florida are blamed on the Category 4 storm. While there was significant damage, it was well below that of Ian a year earlier. Lee was the only Category 5 storm in the Atlantic. By the time it made landfall in Nova Scotia, it was a post-tropical cyclone. To this day, only 4 Category 5 storms have made landfall in the U.S. Meteorologist Emily Gracie looks at the history of these rare but deadly events.
Hurricanes are rated on the Saffir-Simpson wind scale, with Category 5 being the highest and most destructive, with sustained winds of at least 157 miles an hour. In the history of the United States, only 4 Category 5 hurricanes have ever made landfall. The first on record was the Labor Day hurricane of 1935. It devastated the Florida Keys, making landfall near Islamorada with winds estimated at 184 miles an hour. Next was Hurricane Camille in August of 1969. It hit the Mississippi coastline near Bay St. Louis. The weather instruments near the eye were destroyed by the hurricane, making it difficult to measure, but post-storm analysis estimated the winds near 175 miles per hour. Hurricane Andrew slammed into South Florida near Homestead in August of 1992. At that time, winds within Andrew were estimated to be that of a Category 4 hurricane. But in 2002, 10 years after landfall, upon reassessment, it was determined that Andrew was a Category 5 at landfall with peak sustained winds of 165 miles per hour. Most recently, Hurricane Michael made landfall in 2018 near Mexico Beach, Florida. Michael rapidly intensified in the warm Gulf waters right before landfall with winds of 161 miles per hour. Rare extreme wind warnings were issued even well inland as it held on to its hurricane strength into central Georgia. While these 4 storms have stood out in the record books due to their wind speeds, it's important to remember the devastation that has come and will continue to come from future storms due to storm surge and inland flooding. For the National Weather Desk, I'm meteorologist Emily Gracie.
Hurricanes typically deliver plenty of lightning, so do severe thunderstorms. So how do meteorologists keep track of where and how often lightning strikes? Meteorologist Anthony McCary has the answer.
Now, in terms of detecting it itself, we have 2 networks that see the lightning strikes from the clouds to the ground, and also ones that strike from one cloud to the other. That's actually the most frequent type of lightning, is lightning that stays up into the clouds. But there is the National Lightning Detection Network and the Total Lightning Network that help us see where those strokes of lightning are coming from. They detect radio wave changes that help us be able to tell where they are. So at least 3 stations are needed to triangulate where that strike was and how intense. If there's less than 3, sometimes the lightning strike may be over-exaggerated in terms of its strength, or the location could be slightly off. There's also a new technology called lightning arrays. Those provide a 3D mapping of the strike. That's kind of in a research mode. We don't have too much on that yet. Plus, there's satellites up in space that can see them up above, but that also is a little bit tougher to tell whether or not the lightning strike actually made it to the ground.
Unless you live in the tropics, the sultry summer season full of humidity is behind us. But that does not mean those bad hair days that come with it are gone. Turns out humidity and hair don't get along regardless of the time of year. Craig Adams spoke with some experts to get to the root of the problem.
That's one of the top complaints we have, actually.
The ladies from Debut Salon in South Glens Falls spend time year-round untangling hair. Be it spring, summer, fall, or winter, there's no shortage of hair problems to deal with.
Summertime is optimum time of bad hair humidity, but any type of wetness in the air can do in. Any type of rain or wetness, it'll go into the hair bond and like mess up the hair bond and make your hair be out of control.
So to demonstrate, let's make a little out of control hair.
What do you think?
Oh, I like it.
Blonde or brunette, the humidity will find you even if you are specially trained to handle it.
So ladies, let me ask you this. Do hairdressers get bad hair days?
Absolutely we do.
Yes, unfortunately, we are not immune to the bad hair day.
But there are other ways to fight the frizz and win the battle against humidity.
Keratin treatments for hair, and that really seals the hair and protects the hair from humidity. So when you're out in that weather, it's almost like a barrier against it. It fights against the humidity, keeps the hair nice and smooth.
And if you don't want to go through that, well, may I suggest another option?
Now, Brittany, there's a much easier way to fix your hair.
Sometimes there's nothing wrong in taking the easy way out.
Many people go out of their way to catch a beautiful sunrise or sunset, but did you know the sky is filled with the most color either just before sunrise or just after sunset? Meteorologist Tara Blake explains.
Did you know those beautiful colors ahead of a sunrise and after a sunset have a name? In the morning, it's called civil twilight or civil dawn. It's the period of time in which the atmosphere is partially illuminated by the sun. That's about 20 to 30 minutes before your actual sunrise. And by degrees, that would be 6 degrees below the horizon. For the evening, it's known as civil dusk. And that's the moment when the center of the sun is 6 degrees below the horizon in the evening hours.
Winter begins exactly 4 weeks from today. Are you ready? Theron has some winter fun facts you may not know.
How about 3 fun facts about winter? Did you know the Earth is actually closest to the sun in December, even though the days are the shortest in the northern hemisphere? The amount of daylight we get is because of the tilt of the Earth's axis, not the distance to the sun. And ancient Romans actually used the amount of daylight in a day to divide up the hours of the day. During the winter, hours were as short as 45 minutes long. In the summer, they were as long as 75 minutes. And according to the Guinness Book of World Records, the largest snowflake ever recorded fell on a ranch in Fort Keogh, Montana in January of 1887. It measured 15 inches across. A lot of interesting stuff happens during the winter.
And coming up on the National Weather Desk, the role weather played for the Pilgrims both on their voyage here and their arrival in Plymouth. And the effort to reduce carbon dioxide doesn't matter if the U.S. cuts emissions if other countries won't do the same.
You are watching the National Weather Desk.
On this Thanksgiving Day, we want to take a closer look at the role weather played for the Pilgrims. It was significant from their decision to leave England on their voyage here and the harsh winter here in the New World. Emily Gracie helps us better understand the weather story behind the first Thanksgiving.
It feels as if there's sort of weather coming up from the ocean and the seas start to what they call become overgrown. And the waves are 100 foot high. And then the mainsail cracks. The mast cracks, and if they can't make that work, sort of stick it together, as it were, they're going to have to turn back to England. And then they kind of come through, and they suddenly hear birds singing, and the sailors tell them that that is a sign of land. And then they get near, they sort of get to above Provincetown, what is now Provincetown, and they're going to go south and go on to Virginia because that's where there is a colony. And then they get alarmed because the seas are so rough. They sort of think, I think it's safer to just go back to land. And then they land on what is now Provincetown, and they are all incredibly relieved.
But they didn't stay in Provincetown. And did that have to do with the conditions and the weather?
It does. And it's also to do with the fact that Provincetown is lovely, but there aren't any there's no sort of real water supply. It's sandy. And there's also a problem because the weather is getting much worse. And that's when they sort of sail about on a sort of small dinghy. And that's when they find Plymouth.
Tell me about that winter and what they experienced.
Well, I think they were just unprepared for what they were going to experience. I think that was one of the problems. They really didn't know what they were up against. They hadn't brought the right clothes. They hadn't bought fishing nets, and they hadn't bought corn. It might not be a really harsh winter, but it is a winter with lots of snow, and they haven't met the Native Americans yet. So they don't know about snowshoes. They don't know about anything.
To hear more about the weather journey of the Pilgrims, including the first interactions with the Native Americans, make sure you check out this week's episode of our podcast, Off the Radar. Find it anywhere you listen to your podcasts. The United States is the world's largest emitter of carbon dioxide. We know reducing these gases can make a difference in our climate, but would it matter if one country like the U.S. did it, but other countries did not? Meteorologist Ryan Mirando spoke with climate experts to find out.
If the bathtub's got the drain open, but you kick the spigot on, it's never going to empty. And so you got to cut that spigot down.
The spigot of seemingly endless emissions of the greenhouse carbon dioxide gas that's rapidly changing the Earth. Changes that scientists like Diamond at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, have been tracking for over 150 years.
So it's not a made-up thing. The science is very good. It goes back nearly 200 years.
Real science that's been solved before, like the crisis of the hole in the ozone layer back in the 80s that scientists discovered the cause and fixed the issue. Now they're doing it again. Data that NOAA shows the top 3 emitters worldwide are China, India, and here at home in the United States. So does it really matter if one of these countries doesn't uphold their climate agreement?
If the U.S. puts up 5 billion tons of CO2 a year, and you take that out of the equation, that makes a pretty big dent into the 38 billion tons a year that get put out globally.
But if any reduction is good, then whose job is it to cut emissions? Is it mine, yours, or the government's? Well, all of the above.
Citizens working with their elected representatives and policymakers have to come to the agreement of what they're going to do to implement these things.
For some reference of how much carbon dioxide is actually in the air, let's simulate the atmosphere to be these 100 orbs. 78 of them would be nitrogen gas, 21 of them would be oxygen gas. That leaves us with only 1 out of 100. And even in most of this one orb, it's mostly argon. Only about 0.04% is carbon dioxide. A little, though, goes a long way.
And that extra carbon adds more heat, therefore more water content in the air, which we know can exacerbate weather phenomena like heat waves, flooding, hurricanes, and even extreme cold.
Society has to decide, is it a problem that it wants to fix? And while there may be costs associated with fixing it, there are also tremendous costs of not fixing it.
Reporting for the National Weather Desk, I'm Ryan Mirando.
In Nebraska, weather has been ideal for field work, but not so great for crops and cattle, and it's forcing cattle producers in the state to make some tough decisions. Steve White has more.
Yep. Dad's been in the business for 55 years and all my life.
Ever since the floods of 2019, Ryan Sondrup says good rain showers have been few and far between.
But yeah, it's been real tough.
He took a break to attend Husker Harvest Days recently, where he told us soybeans were especially bad.
And after that second round of heat, it just kind of, well, it literally dried up overnight. You know, everything shriveled up, and just the next morning it was brown.
Sondrup had his cattle DNA tested for feed efficiency and says you can see what genetics are working when drought leaves pastures in bad shape.
We had caught an inch of rain before the first round of heat, and man, that heat come in there and it just turned it brown overnight.
Cow-calf producers are the backbone of the industry in Nebraska, and the impact can be far-reaching.
Drought doesn't just affect the summer, it's definitely going to affect calving next year too, so we want to make sure that these girls are in adequate body condition score.
Veterinarians say there's no sense putting money into feeding a cow that won't deliver a calf.
But especially during a drought year, because we want to make sure that we know that that cow is bred. If we're going to be feeding her some stretched forages, if we don't have a lot that's there, we want to make sure that she's going to be one that's going to be able to make us a calf next year, so that we're utilizing the limited amount of forages correctly.
While much of western and southwest Nebraska has received timely rains, others remain in the most extreme drought category, seeing 100-degree temps, cooked crops, and grass alike.
And so we're praying for rain, and we'll get it some days. So
we bring you great weather content here on the show, but we also have a ton of great stuff on social media. Here's a TikTok post from meteorologist Cheriston Clark explaining Seabreeze.
Another installation of whiteboard weather. Today we're talking about something that usually takes place or forms along the ocean, but really can take place and form along any large body of water, and that is the sea breeze. Let's pretend that we're in Charleston, South Carolina, okay? So we've got the water, that's the Atlantic Ocean. Here we've got the land, but then you also have the sun right here. That sun is warming up both the water and the land, but the land warms up just a little bit quicker than the water. So here you have your land, which is much warmer than the ocean. So that warm air will start to rise. But then that colder air over the ocean, that'll start to push a little bit further inland. And that'll actually replace that warm air that's rising. So you have that unstable atmosphere, you have that warm air rising, that's your lifting mechanism. That's when you're going to start to see those showers and thunderstorms develop.
And time now for a short break, but first let's take in views of the Arizona desert from above.
You are watching the National Weather Desk.
The cold weather of winter can pose several risks to cars. Meteorologist Lindsay Storrs posted on Instagram about one way colder temperatures can impact your car.
Tell me if this has ever happened to you. You get in your car on the first cold morning and you see this little symbol. After a little bit of investigation, you find out that your tire pressure is low. But you know your tire pressure was fine yesterday, so what changed while you were sleeping overnight? The temperature. That's what changed. So why does temperature impact tire pressure? Take a look. Air molecules behave differently depending on the temperature. When it's warm, air molecules move quickly and take up more space, so the pressure inside your tire is higher. When it's cold, air molecules move slower and don't take up as much space, so your tire pressure drops. So when you see that little light pop up, it's important to put more air in your tires. If you drive around on tires where the pressure's too low, it can cause tire stress and uneven wear, so you'll have to replace your tires more often.
We'd love to share your weather content on the air. You can find us on all your favorite social media platforms, including Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Just search the National Weather Desk. We'll be right back. Thank you so much. I'm Angela Brown. From everyone here at the National Weather Desk, we hope you have a very happy Thanksgiving. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.